This training will cover absent voter counting boards. The Bureau of Elections developed this training with the recommendation of a group of clerks and election directors who participated in a lean process improvement workshop in 2019. The training explains what absent voter counting boards are and how they are used, what you'll need to set them up, and how to process and count ballots in an absent voter counting board. An absent voter counting board, or AVCB, allows a jurisdiction to efficiently process and tabulate higher volumes of absentee ballots for the whole city or township in a separate secure location. Instead of counting and tabulating each regular precinct's absent voter ballots at the polling place along with in-person votes, jurisdictions use AVCBs to tabulate absent voter ballots in a separate location outside of the polling location where people are voting in person. The AVCB processes absent voter ballots only. It is not open for in-person voting. Not only can an AVCB process one or many precincts' absent voter ballots in the same location, it can often process multiple precincts' absent voter ballots using one tabulator or high-speed scanner. The voter-approved Proposal 2018-3 provided all Michigan voters the right to vote with an absent voter ballot. The universal right to vote by mail, along with a desire to maintain social distancing, means more people are voting using absent voter ballots, meaning more absent voter ballots to process on Election Day. Processing a large volume of absent ballots at the same time as people are voting in person at the precinct can be challenging. One advantage of processing absentee ballots using an absent voter counting board is that ballots can be processed, tabulated, and duplicated if necessary at any time during the day, instead of trying to fit in processing at downtimes during the day or at the end of the night. Another advantage of the absent voter counting board is the ability to process multiple precincts with one counting board and one tabulator on Election Day, allowing the same team of election inspectors to process ballots for multiple precincts. The local election commission establishes the absent voter counting board and appoints the election inspectors for the counting board at the same time it appoints election inspectors for regular precincts, including precinct chairs. The same rules for precinct inspectors apply. There must be at least 3, with at least one of each major political party. Although a single team of AVCB precinct inspectors may process and tabulate ballots for multiple precincts within the counting boards. Absent voter counting boards also have their own tabulator or tabulators, which must be tested in the same way as tabulators used in the precinct. There are several items to consider when moving ballot processing to an absent voter counting board. It is necessary to have a good amount of space so that workers have enough room to process ballots in one part of the AVCB and tabulate ballots in a different part of the AVCB. It is also important to consider space for social distancing. It might be necessary to set up groups of smaller teams working at a distance. Election inspectors, poll challengers, poll watchers, or media entering the absent voter counting board must be provided the understanding that they will be sequestered until 8 p.m. An exception to the sequestration is made for election officials delivering ballots or resolving processing questions. Also worth noting, the only cell phone allowed in an absent voter counting board is the phone used by election inspectors to communicate with election officials. Certain supplies are needed to process absentee ballots in AV counting boards, including the AV counting board poll book, which is similar to a precinct poll book. It is also important to have extra secrecy sleeves, blank ballots for duplication, AV lists printed from QVF, and AV ballots for processing. The AV applications are not mandatory for review in the AV counting board process, but need to be made available at the request of precinct inspectors. Regular office supplies are also needed, including pens, paper, and letter openers. For higher volume, high-speed letter openers are encouraged. It is always important to have safety and cleaning supplies such as latex or nitrile exam gloves, hand sanitizer, and Clorox wipes. To prevent the spread of disease, masks or face shields are also recommended. Depending on how the AVCB is set up, it may also be helpful to have tape, glass, plexiglass, or plastic dividers to help mark off social distances. The AV Counting Board is open just like an in-person precinct. The election inspectors take the oath of office and sign the precinct book. The tabulator is opened following the vendor instructions, and the zero tape is run before processing ballots. Yes, challengers can be present in an AV Counting Board too. Challengers have the same rights and responsibilities as precinct challengers, except they are limited to a single challenger per political party. They must take an oath with the chair upon entering the counting board and are sequestered until 8 p.m., and are restricted from using a cell phone. Challengers should be provided with this information upon entrance, and it is recommended that you have a separate piece of paper for oaths given to challengers entering the counting board. These oaths are returned in the local clerk envelope, and comments are made in the remarks section of the poll book. Keep in mind that there may be challengers when marking off the AVCB to leave room for social distancing. Before beginning to process any ballots, it is advisable to conduct a physical count of ballots delivered from the local clerk for processing. As an important accountability check, the number of ballots received must equal the number of voters on the start of day AV list. If the count does not match, contact the local clerk before processing begins. After confirming the clerk has processed the ballot by checking for the clerk approval, open the envelope and slide the ballot slightly out of the secrecy sleeve, so that only the ballot stub is revealed. Compare the ballot number on the ballot stub to the ballot number issued by the clerk, which is also found on the back of the envelope or the voter address label. If the ballot numbers match, remove the stub on the ballot and remove the secrecy sleeve from the envelope, keeping the ballot within the secrecy sleeve. We'll cover what to do if the numbers don't match later on. Be sure to work in teams of 2 workers with differing political party affiliation. Following the local clerk's guidance, you may then highlight or cross the voter off the AV list, but that is not required. The paper AV voter list created in the QVF allows the inspectors to note the voter on the list and check ballot numbers. If helpful, workers may highlight or cross off the voter when the ballot is inspected and prepared for final processing and tabulation, but it is not required. Before envelopes arrive at the AVCB, the clerk should have already checked signatures. AVCB workers can visually scan the back of the return envelope quickly to make sure the clerk completed the approval section. This section will also indicate if the voter received assistance, which is noted in the poll book. If there is no clerk approval, return to the clerk for review as soon as possible. It is important to maintain ballot secrecy while comparing the ballot stub to the ballot number located on the voter address label. The stub number should match the number recorded on the outside of the envelope. You may remove the secrecy sleeve from the ballot envelope to make this comparison, but make sure that the ballot remains protected in the secrecy sleeve. If the voter is not on the printed AV voter list from the QVF, check to ensure the ballot is in the correct precinct if the AVCB is processing multiple precincts. If you are unable to locate the voter on the list for any precinct, contact the local clerk as soon as possible. If the ballot numbers do not agree or the ballot stub is missing and no explanation for the discrepancy can be found, for example, voters residing in the same household have switched their ballots in each other's envelopes, the ballot must be processed as a challenged ballot. If the numbers agree, or if you can resolve the discrepancy, continue without processing as a challenged ballot. If the ballot is missing from the envelope, note that the ballot is missing in the poll book remarks, but do not include the voter's name, and set the envelope aside. This information will be included in the ballot summary under Number of Ballots Delivered to Precinct that did not include a ballot or rejected for any reason, item E. If there are 2 ballots in the envelope, document this occurrence in the remarks and try to determine a cause. Often this will occur when 2 voters in the same household return their ballots in one envelope. If you have 2 signatures on the envelope, verify both signatures and contact the clerk to accept or reject the ballots. Damaged ballots must be duplicated, and finally, if the secrecy sleeve is missing, the ballot should still be counted. Do your best not to expose the votes while inserting the ballot into an extra secrecy sleeve provided by the clerk. Once the ballot number has been verified, the ballot stub should be removed while keeping the ballot in the secrecy sleeve. When this process is complete, the ballots can be removed from the secrecy sleeves as they can no longer be tied to an individual voter. The ballots can then be flattened and bundled in stacks of 10 or 25 and then processed through the tabulator. If a ballot must be processed as challenged, first write the ballot number in pencil on the top of the ballot under the stub. Next, conceal this number and tabulate the ballot. All challenged ballots must be noted in the remarks. Further training on challenged ballots can be provided by the clerk. If a ballot is returned by the tabulated as not tabulated, 2 inspectors should review the message on the tabulator and compare it to the ballot to determine the reason the ballot was returned. If the tabulator returned the ballot because of an overvote or blank ballot, rerun the ballot through the tabulator by hitting the Cast Ballot button. Ambiguous marks, voter corrections, damaged ballots, or invalid write-ins require that the ballot be duplicated prior to tabulation. Duplication can be done at any time in an AV counting board, using a trained team of 2 election inspectors of differing political parties. Using 2 election inspectors, one reads the vote from the original ballot, while the other marks the duplicate ballot, while the reader checks the mark. This is referred to as the reader-checker method. Election inspectors must duplicate ballots using proper ballot marking validity standards provided by the clerk. All FWAB, MOVE, and accessible ballots that were sent electronically, printed, and returned by voters will require duplication on Election Day. We recommend a special trained team to duplicate ballots during processing. Refer to the training videos in the e-learning center regarding the specifics of duplicating ballots. At the closing of the polls, contact the clerk to ensure that all AV ballots have been received. It is important to check with the clerk before closing the polls because the clerk may be delivering AV ballots that were issued to voters who registered on Election Day. The clerk may deliver AV ballots after 8 p.m. if voters have registered at the end of the night. Once all ballots have been processed, including the ballots that require duplication, close the polls on the tabulator according to the vendor instructions and print the totals tape. The AV list can be reprinted or an addendum can be run to include those ballots that were returned on Election Day. There is no requirement to reprint the QVF AV list if the names are highlighted and the late issued ballots are documented on the same list, but doing so may be beneficial to the Board of Canvassers. The total number of voters must match the total on the tabulator tape. After the clerk has been contacted to verify there are no remaining AV ballots to be delivered, and once all ballots have been processed, including the ballots that require duplication, close the polls on the tabulator according to the vendor instructions and print the totals tape. The total number of voters must match the total on the tabulator tape. If it does not match, review records available. Any valid reason that the numbers do not match must be documented on the remarks page, and the clerk must be contacted. The AV Counting Board summary in the AVCB poll book may look like one of these examples. Be certain that all fields are completed. The difference at the end of the ballot summary must equal 0 unless there is a valid documented reason provided on the remarks page. Here are some tips if the tabulator total does not match or the ballot summary does not equal 0. If the tabulator has more ballots tabulator than voters on the list, compare the list to the applications to vote to make certain every voter was checked. A hand count of the ballots may be necessary to verify your numbers. If the tabulator shows fewer ballots tabulated than number of voters, verify that all ballots were removed from the AV envelopes and counted, all ballots that were rejected were recorded, and all ballots were duplicated properly. If the issue is not resolved, contact your clerk. Some quick reminders. If you are processing multiple precincts in an AV counting board, be sure to sort all the ballots by precinct and bundle by precinct in the ballot container. Band the ballots together or provide a folder or colored paper to provide visual separation. This is vital in the event of a recount. Also, document on the poll book remarks page which precinct's ballots are secured together in which ballot container by the seal number. All workers who are present at the close of the AVCB must sign the tabulator tape, as well as the certificate of election inspectors. The Board of Canvassers will check to make certain those who sign the tapes also sign the certificate. Finally, a Republican and Democratic precinct inspector must deliver all materials together to the receiving board. By following these steps carefully, you should be able to successfully run an absent voter counting board on Election Day. A special thank you to all the clerks that helped the Bureau of Elections develop this training by participating in the Absent Voter Ballot Lean Process Improvement Work Group. And remember, the Bureau of Elections staff is always happy to help answer any questions you may have. Thanks for watching.